Part 1. The Beginning. A Whisper in Red River. They say every legend begins with a whisper. And in the heart of Tennessee, where the mist lingers low and the rivers carve through fields of oak and hickory, one whisper grew into something else, something the world would remember as the Bell Witch. Before there were books or websites or ghost hunters with night vision cameras, there was a family, the Bells of Red River, and a story that would ripple across centuries. Chapter 1. A Quiet Farm in Tennessee. The year was 1804. John Bell, a farmer from North Carolina, moved his wife Lucy and their 9 children to the rolling countryside of Robertson County, Tennessee. The place was known then as Red River, a small, thriving settlement of tobacco, corn, and quiet Christian life. John was a respected man, wealthy for the region, a deacon at the local church, a steady hand in a new world still learning its shape. The Bell farm stretched across hundreds of acres, rich soil, tall grass, and woods that seemed to hum after sunset. To the eye, it was paradise. But paradise never lasts. For over a decade, the Bells lived in peace. The land gave, the family prospered, and their name carried weight in the small community. No one, not even John himself, could have imagined that beneath that calm surface, something ancient was waiting. Chapter 2. The First Sign. It began in 1817. One late afternoon, John Bell walked through his cornfield, the gold of summer fading into the dark. He stopped. There, between the rows, stood an animal. It looked like a dog, black, crouched low, its eyes fixed on him. But something was wrong. The shape was off, the head too large, the body almost human in the way it moved. When John raised his shotgun and fired, the creature didn't yelp. It simply vanished. He searched for tracks, found none. The ground was undisturbed, as if the thing had never been there at all. John returned home uneasy, but said nothing. The frontier was full of strange animals, and men didn't speak of fear. But that single encounter marked the beginning of a nightmare that would consume his family for years. Chapter 3. Unseen Visitors. Not long after, others began to see things. His son Drew swore he saw a giant bird perched on the fence, so large it couldn't have been real. His daughter Betsy, wandering near the orchard, saw a woman in a green dress walking through the trees, a figure that faded before her eyes. At first they dismissed it all. The land was new, the nights were long, and imagination had a way of stretching shadows. But soon the sounds began, tapping on the windows, clawing at the doors, the flutter of wings beating against the roof in the dead of night. John would grab his gun and run outside, certain it was some prankster from town. But there was never anyone there. No footprints, no laughter, no wind, just silence. Night after night the noises returned, louder each time, until the house itself seemed to tremble. Plates rattled, beds shook, and what began as annoyance turned into dread. Chapter 4. The Nights Grow Violent. At first the disturbances were only sound, but soon the invisible visitor made itself felt. The children, especially Betsy, began to scream in the night. Their blankets ripped from their beds, their hair pulled by unseen hands. Sometimes they'd wake to find scratches across their faces or bruises forming overnight. The sound of choking would echo through the rooms, as though someone unseen was gasping for air. When they'd light a candle, the sound would stop. But as soon as the flame died, the strangling breaths returned. It happened so often that John began to think his family was cursed. And in time, the neighbors would agree. Chapter 5. A Neighbor's Test. Desperate, John confided in one of his closest friends, James Johnson, a man known for his strong faith and steady mind. When John told him what was happening, Johnson didn't laugh. Instead, he offered to stay the night. That evening, James and his wife joined the Bells in prayer. The house was quiet until midnight. Then came the pounding. On the walls, the floor, the roof. Furniture moved on its own. The air thickened, like the room itself was breathing. And over the chaos came a laugh, low, mocking, inhuman. James Johnson stood up and called into the darkness, "In the name of God, who are you?" For a moment, silence. Then the noise stopped, completely. No scratching, no laughter, nothing. But when he whispered again, "What do you want?" the sounds erupted all over the house. The walls shook, the bed lifted. Betsy screamed. Whatever this thing was, it was intelligent. It was listening, and it understood. Chapter 6. The Secret Spreads. When morning came, James told John the truth. This isn't a prank, and it isn't an animal. It's something else. Something that can hear and answer. Word spread fast through Red River. Neighbors came to see for themselves. Some mocked the Bells, others offered to pray with them. But curiosity soon turned into fear, because the more people came, the louder the spirit grew. At night, the unseen force began knocking in rhythm, responding to questions. How many people are here? 3 knocks. How many horses are in the barn? 2. Each answer was correct, every time. People started calling it the witch, and though no one saw her, they swore they could feel her presence, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next night to fall. From that point forward, the Bell Witch was no longer just a haunting. It became a spectacle, a thing that defied reason, and it wasn't done yet, because soon this spirit would speak, and the world would never forget what it said. Part 2. The Witch Finds Her Voice. By the winter of 1818, the Bell Farm was no longer just haunted. It was alive. Every night brought new sounds, chains dragging across the floor, furniture thrown, walls trembling under invisible fists. The Bells had searched every inch of their home. No rats, no pranksters, no reason. And yet when the clock struck midnight, it would start again. But what terrified them most wasn't the noise. It was the voice that came after. Chapter 1. When the Walls Began to Speak. It started with whispers. Faint, breathless murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Then, as if learning to speak, the whispers shaped into words, short phrases, names. The first time Lucy Bell heard it clearly, she froze. The voice was small, like a child mimicking an adult. She called for John, but before he reached the room, the whisper rose, clearer, sharper, and this time unmistakably human. "I am a spirit." The sound carried through the entire house, a woman's tone, though broken and strained. Everyone heard it. And when they demanded to know who she was, she replied, "I was once happy, but have been disturbed." Chapter 2. An Audience for the Witch. After that night, there was no going back. The spirit, or whatever it was, spoke often, sometimes in soft, playful tones, sometimes shrieking in fury, but always, always listening. Word spread fast through Red River. Visitors began to come from nearby towns, eager to hear the talking ghost. Some brought Bibles, others brought whiskey, but everyone left changed, because the voice was real. It answered questions. It sang hymns. It quoted scripture with perfect memory. Some nights it mocked the men's prayers, repeating every word in the exact tone of the preacher. Other times it debated them, line for line, verse for verse. It knew the Bible better than any of them. And that's when the town realized whatever haunted the Bells wasn't just intelligent, it was educated. Chapter 3. The Witch That Knew Everything. Soon, the witch, as everyone now called her, began revealing secrets, private things, conversations between neighbors, confessions never spoken aloud. She knew who quarreled with whom, who had sinned, who had lied. She would tattle on the townsfolk, exposing them in front of their peers. And when someone tried to call her bluff, she would describe their home, their family, even what they were wearing that day. No one could explain it. No one dared to doubt her twice. At night, when the air grew heavy and the candles dimmed, the witch would sing hymns in the voice of the church choir. Every part in perfect harmony, all at once. She'd mimic the Reverend's Sunday sermon, even if he'd given it miles away. Some swore they heard 2 sermons being preached simultaneously, one in town and one echoing from the bell house. The witch, it seemed, could be in 2 places at once. Chapter 4. The Missing Tooth and the Buried Treasure. Like all tricksters, the witch loved to play games. Sometimes cruel, sometimes childish. When asked what she wanted, she once told the Bells she was a spirit whose grave had been disturbed, that her bones had been scattered, and she was searching for her missing tooth. John Bell remembered that years earlier his sons had found a small burial mound in the woods, likely an old Native American grave. One of the farmhands had even taken a jawbone home as a curiosity. When the witch mentioned it, she laughed, saying her tooth had fallen through the floorboards. John tore up the floor in search of it. He found nothing, and the witch's laughter echoed through every room. "Just a joke. You're all too easy to fool." It was only the beginning of her deceptions. A few days later, she told another story, this time of a buried treasure, hidden long ago by a dying settler. She described the spot in vivid detail, beneath a great stone near the river bend. John's sons and their neighbors dug for hours, sweating under the sun, until they uncovered the rock and found nothing. That night, the witch laughed again. "Did you enjoy your exercise?" she teased. "I told you there was something buried there. Your own stupidity." From then on, the spirit's games became infamous. She would predict the weather for the farmers, always correctly. She'd interrupt church gatherings to mock the reverends, repeating their sermons word for word before they even began. Sometimes she'd join in on hymns, harmonizing with the congregation, in a voice that was too many voices at once. Whatever this entity was, it was no longer confined to the bell house. It had grown into something else, something that knew everything, saw everything, and wanted everyone to know it. Chapter 5. Betsy's Torment. But for all her tricks and jokes, the witch had a darker obsession. And her name was Betsy Bell. Betsy was 12 when it began, and from the first day, the witch hated her. No one knew why. At night, Betsy's hair was pulled, her face was slapped, she was scratched until she bled. Sometimes, she'd feel needles pricking her skin, only to find nothing there. She screamed night after night until her brothers came running. But whenever they burst into the room, the attacks would stop, and a cold laughter would echo through the air. Even when Betsy was sent to stay with neighbors, the haunting followed her. At James Johnson's home, at the Porters at the Thorns, Everywhere she went, the voice came too. It whispered in her ear, mocked her prayers, and called her by name. "Betsy," it would say softly, "I told you I can follow you anywhere." Chapter 6. A Town Obsessed. By now, the Bell Witch was no longer a secret. She was an attraction. Hundreds of people visited the Bell Farm hoping to hear her speak. They brought their own questions, and she answered them all in different voices, in languages they didn't know, with facts she couldn't possibly have learned. When asked where she came from, her answers changed every time. One night she said she was the spirit of a dead woman. Another, a native ghost. Sometimes she claimed she was from heaven. Other times, hell. And when one man demanded the truth, she said simply, "I am a spirit from everywhere. Heaven, hell, the earth. I am in the air, in the house, in every place it is, at any time. I have lived for millions of years." After that, no one asked again. The voice that had begun as a whisper was now a chorus, and soon it would name itself, not as a ghost, not as a demon, but as old Kate Batts's witch, the one who swore she would torment John Bell to death and the world would never be the same. Part 3. The Curse of Old Kate Batts. By 1819, the voice that haunted the Bell Farm finally gave itself a name. When asked once more who or what she was, the spirit replied clear as daylight, "I am old Kate Batts's witch, and I have come to torment John Bell." Those words changed everything. Chapter 1. The Woman Called Kate Batts. In Red River, everyone knew Kate Batts. She lived less than a mile from the Bell place, a strange, fiery woman with a sharp tongue and habits that unsettled her neighbors. Her husband, Frederick, had been injured years before, leaving Kate to run the family's affairs alone, something not often done by women in those days. People whispered about her. They said she begged for brass pins, muttered charms, and kept odd trinkets on her porch. They called her eccentric, even mad, but none called her a witch, until now. Years earlier, Kate Batts and John Bell had quarreled over a land deal. Kate believed he'd cheated her, and in anger she'd sworn, "I'll get even with you, John Bell, if it takes my last breath." When the haunting began and the invisible voice took her name, the town put the pieces together. Coincidence was no longer an option. To them, the witch wasn't just a spirit. She was Kate Batts herself, come back from beyond. Chapter 2. A Name Takes Hold. From that night on, everyone called the entity Kate. When spoken to, she answered to it. Sometimes she even used it with pride. "Kate's here," she'd declare, in that cold, amused tone that seemed to vibrate through the wood of the house. John Bell refused to believe his old neighbor could have anything to do with it. He called it blasphemy, a cruel rumor against a living woman. But the rest of Red River wasn't so forgiving. When people saw Kate Batts limping through town with her walking stick, they crossed the road. Children hid behind fences. If a horse went lame or a cow fell ill, someone always said Kate did it. And though the real Kate Batts denied every accusation, the legend had already claimed her soul. She was the witch now, whether she liked it or not. Chapter 3. The Four Voices. Soon after the spirit took the name Kate, her voice began to multiply. At first there were two, one deep, one childlike, arguing in the dark. Then there were four. Black Dog, the harsh motherly voice that cursed and commanded. Mathematics and cryptography, both soft, lilting, feminine tones. Jerusalem, a boyish voice that whimpered and laughed in equal measure. Each had its own temper. They fought among themselves, shouting, threatening, sometimes singing bawdy tavern songs until dawn. The house would shake with their quarrels. Dishes rattled, walls thumped, and the air stank of whiskey. When Black Dog had enough, she would shriek for silence. And just like that, the fighting stopped. Then came laughter, cruel and close to the ear, followed by the sound of footsteps leaving rooms where no one stood. To those who heard it, the multiple voices were proof that the haunting was not one ghost but a legion, a force of spirits bound together by hate for John Bell. Chapter 4: The Witch and the Farmhands. No one on the property was spared. The Bell family's enslaved workers spoke of being tripped and choked by unseen hands, of doors slamming in their faces. At night they saw candle-like lights flickering in the fields, moving through the trees as if someone were carrying lanterns made of fire. One man named Dean, known for his strength with an axe, was haunted more than anyone. He claimed the witch often appeared to him as a huge black dog with blazing eyes, sometimes with 2 heads, sometimes none. Once, when Dean swung his axe at the beast, it vanished in a flash, and he heard the witch's voice behind him. "You split my head once, Dean. That's why you see me with 2. Dean began carrying his axe everywhere he went, along with a witch ball his wife had made from her own hair, something she said would protect him. But protection was never enough. One night as he crossed the field, the dog appeared again. "Give me the ball," it growled. When he refused, the air thickened, and Dean felt his body twist. His legs bent backward, his hands turned to hooves. He tried to cry out, but the voice that came was the bray of a mule. He said he could feel the witch climb onto his back, another small figure behind her, both laughing as they rode him through the dark. Only when he reached the door of his cabin and saw his wife's face did he fall to the ground, human again, gasping. The next morning, he found hoof prints in the dirt where he'd run. Chapter 5: Cruel Lessons. The witch saved her worst torment for the youngest. A boy named Harry, late one morning to start the fires, was scolded by John Bell, but the spirit decided that wasn't punishment enough. Invisible hands lifted the boy by the neck, thrashed him in the air, and beat him with what sounded like a wooden stick. When it was over, Harry's back was covered in red welts. Another child, Phyllis, tried to copy a gymnastic trick she'd seen, folding her feet behind her head. Suddenly she couldn't move. Her legs locked, her muscles stiffened, and she screamed for help. When her mother found her, she thought it was misbehavior and whipped her until Phyllis fell limp, sobbing that the witch had held her still. Lucy Bell tested the spirit once by hiding a servant girl under her bed. The witch erupted in rage, shouting that if it were anyone but Lucy, the girl would die. Moments later, spitting sounds came from under the bed. The girl crawled out, her face frothing with white foam, shrieking that the witch had tried to spit her to death. Chapter 6: Skeptics and Sufferers. Of course, not everyone believed. Word spread beyond Red River. Preachers, scholars, self-proclaimed witch tamers, all eager to expose the haunting as fraud. A detective named Mr. Williams arrived certain it was trickery. The first night, nothing happened. The second, as he lay smug in his bed, something pinned him to the floor. Invisible fists pounded his chest, tore at his hair. When he screamed, the voice whispered, "Tell me, Mr. Williams, who do you think is beating you now?" By morning he was gone, too terrified to eat the Bells' breakfast. Then came the conjurer from Kentucky. Dr. M, he called himself, boasting that no spirit dared face his silver charms. He burned herbs, muttered incantations, and declared the witch banished. The house was silent for days. Then, one night, her laughter rolled through the rafters. "Missing a few ingredients, aren't you, Doctor?" The fire blew out. A storm hit the roof. Dr. M fled before sunrise, his horse galloping so fast, the witch bragged later she'd helped him along the road herself. Each skeptic came thinking they would uncover a lie. Each left humbled or broken or worse. The haunting of the Bell family was no longer a curiosity. It was a sickness that spread through anyone who touched it. And as the nights grew longer, the witch's true purpose began to reveal itself in the slow unraveling of John Bell's mind and body. Part 4. The Afflictions of John and Betsy. By late 1819, the Bell Witch's purpose was becoming clear. Whatever she was, spirit, demon, or something older, her malice had found its focus. Her eyes, if she had any, were on John Bell and his daughter Betsy. The rest of the family still endured her games, doors slamming, dishes thrown, the occasional ghostly prank. But for John and Betsy, the torment became deeply personal and far more cruel. Chapter 1. The Torment of Betsy Bell. Betsy was growing into a young woman now, 15, bright and kind. She had suitors, laughter, and the kind of innocent joy that only seemed to anger the spirit more. Every night her screams pierced the quiet fields. Sometimes her hair was twisted into knots so tight they tore from her scalp. Sometimes her skin bore the marks of open hands, as though someone had struck her full across the face. When she cried, the witch would mock her. "Don't you look pretty when you cry, Betsy?" Her brothers tried to protect her, holding her hands at night, praying aloud until morning. But the witch had no mercy for them either. When they spoke, she mimicked their voices, repeating every word they said until they stopped out of sheer fear. And when they stayed silent, she whispered in Betsy's ear, "You can't hide from me. I can follow you anywhere." Chapter 2. Love and Cruelty. There was one thing that brought Betsy a brief reprieve. A young man named Joshua Gardner. He was kind, soft-spoken, and deeply in love with her. When they walked together along the river, the witch was silent. But the peace didn't last. The more Betsy's affection grew, the angrier the witch became. Whenever Joshua visited, the voice filled the house, shrieking, threatening, cursing. At night, it whispered to Betsy, "Don't marry him. He'll bring you misery." When Betsy ignored her, the witch screamed her name until the windows shook. And one night, when Joshua held Betsy's hand, the air between them turned ice cold. A shadow crossed the floor, and they both heard it. "Break it off, or I'll make you regret it." Betsy tried to be brave. She prayed, she defied it. But soon, her health began to fail. Fainting spells, fever, sleeplessness. Finally, one morning, she told Joshua they couldn't be together. And as she wept, the witch laughed and said, "I told you so, Betsy Bell." Chapter 3. The Sickness of John Bell. While Betsy's spirit withered under constant fear, her father's body began to break. At first, it was small things. John would stutter mid-sentence, his lips trembling. Then sudden spasms, his jaw locking, his tongue swelling. He couldn't eat, couldn't pray aloud. Sometimes his face would twist violently, as if an invisible hand had struck him. The witch would mock him mercilessly. "Old Jack Bell. How's that tongue today? Can't you speak, John?" At first he ignored it, but as months passed, the attacks became constant. He'd collapse mid-step, his hands shaking uncontrollably, his eyes rolling back in his head. Doctors called it a nervous disorder. Neighbors called it witchcraft. The witch called it justice. Chapter 4. A Broken Faith. The Bells were God-fearing people. They prayed at dawn and again before dusk. But by this time, even prayer brought no peace. When they recited the Lord's Prayer, the witch would join in, mocking the words in a perfect imitation of Lucy's gentle voice, twisting the verses into something blasphemous. Our Father, who art in hell. They tried reading scripture aloud, but the Bible pages turned on their own. Candles blew out mid-sentence. And once when John Jr. tried to preach to his siblings, a heavy book lifted from the table and slammed into the wall beside him. It wasn't just torment anymore. It was domination, as if the witch wanted to destroy not only their lives, but their faith itself. Chapter 5. A Night of Violence. One evening, as the family gathered by the hearth, a sudden roar filled the room, as if the entire chimney had collapsed inward. The children screamed. John staggered back, clutching his face. His jaw had locked again, his hands convulsing. Betsy rushed to him, sobbing. And from the shadows, the witch's voice hissed, "He's mine now." For hours, the family prayed beside him while he gasped and shuddered in the chair. When the attack passed, John looked up at his son and said, weakly, "My boy, not long will you have a father to wait upon. This thing is killing me by slow torture." That night, John Bell knelt beside his bed and prayed harder than ever before, asking not for his own deliverance, but for the safety of his family. He begged God to end his suffering if it would free them. And as he prayed, a calm fell over him, as if for one moment heaven had answered. But the witch whispered from the darkness, "It won't be heaven that takes you, John Bell." Chapter 6. Lucy's Grace. There was one person in the house the witch would not harm, Lucy Bell. She called her Old Luce and spoke of her with an odd reverence. When Lucy fell ill that autumn, the witch sat at her bedside every night. She spoke softly to her, sang hymns so beautiful they made the women in the room weep. And when Lucy's appetite faded, the witch said, "Hold out your hands, Luce." Hazelnuts dropped into them from thin air. No one saw where they came from. No holes in the ceiling, no tricks. Then came grapes, fresh as if plucked from a vine, that very moment. The witch told her, "You'll never need to fear me. You're a good woman, Luce." But even in kindness there was unease. Because what sort of thing, human or not, could bring fruit from nowhere? Chapter 7. The Prophecy. Before Lucy recovered, the witch told her something strange, something she would never forget. She said, "I'll come again, many years from now, and people will think themselves wise enough to understand what I am. But you, Luce, from where you'll be, you'll see what they've become. You'll see their greed, their envy. And then, Luce, you'll finally know what I am and why I came." Lucy wept. She asked if the witch was sent by God or by something darker, but the spirit only laughed. "Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it." Chapter 8. The Calm Before the End. After that prophecy, the house was quiet for a while. The witch's visits grew shorter, her laughter softer. Even Betsy had nights of peace again. But John Bell's body was fading fast. He spoke less, ate less, slept little. When he tried to walk, his legs trembled beneath him. Sometimes, in the corner of his eye, he'd see her, a shadow in the doorway, waiting. By December of 1820, everyone in Red River knew the end was near. The witch had promised to kill John Bell, and soon that promise would be kept. Part 5. The Death of John Bell. It was December 19th, 1820. The Bell farmhouse sat quiet under a veil of frost. No laughter, no singing, only the soft, rhythmic ticking of a clock. The same clock that had marked every sleepless night of their torment. That morning, John Bell didn't wake up. He wasn't dead, not yet. But he wouldn't open his eyes, wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. His breathing was shallow. His skin, pale as parchment. Lucy tried to rouse him, calling his name, shaking his shoulder. Nothing. When John Jr. went to the medicine cupboard, he found the shelves empty. Every vial of medicine the doctor had prescribed, gone. All except one. A small glass bottle sat alone, filled with a dark, smoky liquid the color of old blood. No one in the family had ever seen it before. Chapter 1. I Fixed Him. John Jr. held the vial up to the light. The smell was foul, sharp, like copper and ash. He turned to the others. "Who brought this here?" No one answered. And then, from somewhere near the fireplace, the witch's voice echoed, cold and triumphant. "I put it there. I gave old Jack a big dose last night while he was asleep. He'll never get up from that bed again." The room froze. Lucy screamed for help. John Jr. shouted prayers through tears. But the voice only laughed. "Don't waste your breath. I told you I'd kill him. And I have." Chapter 2. The Cat. When the doctor arrived, he examined the vial, puzzled. He'd prescribed nothing like it. To test it, he dabbed a drop of the liquid onto a saucer and offered it to the family cat. The animal licked it once and convulsed violently. It rolled across the floor, clawing at the air, choking on its tongue. Within seconds, it was dead. A shriek of laughter erupted from the walls. "There's proof enough for you, Doctor." The old man's got a stronger stomach than that one. Horrified, John Jr. threw the vial into the fire. A plume of blue flame shot up the chimney, and with it, the smell of sulfur filled the house. Then silence. A silence that seemed to stretch forever. Chapter 3. The Death of Old Jack. The next morning, December 20th, John Bell was gone. He'd slipped away sometime before dawn, eyes half open, a faint trace of a smile on his lips. No one heard him go. But everyone heard her. "He's dead!" the witch screamed, her voice echoing from every beam of the house. "Old Jack Bell is dead! I've got him this time! Ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha!" The laughter was relentless, high, manic, echoing across the fields. It carried through the air so far that neighbors miles away swore they heard it. Inside the Bell home, Lucy fell to her knees beside her husband's body. And as she wept, the witch began to sing, a long, mocking funeral hymn in perfect tune. Some said it was "How Firm a Foundation." Others remembered a different song entirely, but all agreed it was beautiful, too beautiful. The family buried John Bell 2 days later, under a gray sky. Hundreds came, neighbors, preachers, strangers. Even those who had mocked the Bells now stood solemn, afraid to speak. As the coffin was lowered, the witch's voice rang out again, loud enough for all to hear. "I told you I'd kill him, and now I've done it." Then for the first time she sang laughter. Not words, just laughter, broken into notes. a melody of mockery that chilled every soul in Red River. Chapter 4. Aftermath. For weeks after John Bell's death, the witch remained in the house. But her tone had changed. She no longer tormented Betsy, no longer slapped, scratched, or pulled her hair. Instead, she cooed at her softly, almost motherly, as if comforting her for her loss. She told Lucy where to find misplaced things, whispered to her when she wept. She spoke of faraway lands and told stories of girls in other countries. It was as if, having fulfilled her promise, the witch's fury had cooled into pity. Or perhaps she was only savoring her victory. Either way, peace had returned. A twisted, fragile peace built on death. Chapter 5. A final conversation. In the months that followed, John Jr. grew bitter, hollowed by anger. He could not forgive the spirit for what it had done. One night he called out to her, demanding answers. "Why?" he shouted. "Why did you kill my father?" The witch's voice came calm and slow. "Your father sees what you do, John. He's at peace. He knows your future and smiles upon you." John shook his head. "No peace can come from murder." The witch laughed quietly. "You think me cruel, but someday you'll understand why I came, not for him, but for what would come after." Then she said something stranger still. "When I bid you goodbye, I won't return until it's time to show what I am." After that night, she grew quieter. Fewer visits, fewer voices. The house began to sleep again, but none of them forgot. Not the way her laughter had echoed through their father's funeral, nor the promise that she would return. The witch had kept every word she ever spoke, and this, too, would be no exception. Because as she departed, she whispered one last thing to the family. "I'll be gone for 7 years. Then you'll see me again." And she did return. Part 6. The Return of the Witch. When John Bell was laid to rest beneath the cold Tennessee soil, the town of Red River tried to move on. The family's fields fell quiet. The house grew still. And the witch, for the first time in years, was silent. But silence was never the end of her story, because before her voice faded from the walls of the Bell farmhouse, she left a promise. "I'll be gone for 7 years, and then I'll come again." And she did. Chapter 1. 7 years later. It was 1828. 7 winters had come and gone since the death of John Bell. The Bell family had scattered, most of the children grown, married, or moved to other farms. Only Lucy and her sons Richard and Joel still lived on the old property. At first, the nights were quiet. Then came the knocking. Soft at first, a gentle rapping beneath the floorboards. Then scratching on the bedposts. The blankets tugged, the doors creaked, and the old familiar voice whispered again. "Miss me?" Richard tried to ignore it. Joel laughed it off. But Lucy knew better. The witch had kept her word. Chapter 2. The Second Haunting. This time the activity was subtle, more like an echo than a storm. The bedsheets moved, the furniture creaked, but the air felt thinner, weaker, like a ghost, replaying old memories. Richard insisted they stay calm, that speaking of it would only invite her deeper into their lives. So they made a pact. No one in the family would mention the witch. And within 2 weeks, the disturbances stopped. No more scratching, no more whispers. It was as if she'd grown bored of a house that no longer feared her. But her visits weren't over. They had only moved. Chapter 3. John Bell Jr. Not long after the second haunting ended at the farmhouse, the witch appeared again. This time to John Bell Jr., now living in his own home miles away. It was March of 1828. He was reading by candlelight when a familiar coldness filled the room. The flame flickered, the air turned thick. Then came her voice, calm, mocking, unmistakable. "John, it's been 7 years. I hope you're not as angry as before." John Jr. froze. He recognized that voice immediately. His heart raced, but he refused to show fear. He said, "Wherever you've been, Spirit, may God keep you there." The witch only laughed. "I've been in the West Indies, John. 7 years among the islands. I've seen things you can't imagine." She spoke casually, almost like an old acquaintance visiting for tea. She promised she'd do him no harm, only talk. And talk she did. Chapter 4: Conversations with the Witch. For the next several weeks, John Jr. claimed the witch visited him nightly. She spoke of ancient civilizations, prophecies, and the fate of humankind. At times, her voice was mournful, other times, filled with scorn. She told him she had lived countless lives, watched empires rise and fall. And then she said something that chilled him to his core. "I've seen worlds far greater than this one destroyed in the blink of an eye." Like a powder pan flash, she spoke of Egypt, of kings and priests who harnessed powers lost to modern man. She spoke of a great civilization in Africa, millions of years old, swallowed by corruption and wiped from existence. And then she spoke of America's future. "This nation will drown in its own pride," she said. "The rich will crush the poor. The laws will serve only gold, and like Rome before it, your country will fall." John Jr. tried to reason with her, to challenge her prophecies. But she only smiled and whispered, "I've been right before, haven't I?" Chapter 5: The Prophecies. In their long conversations, the witch made predictions that would echo through generations. She told John Jr. of a war that would divide America, a civil war where brother would fight brother, and the enslaved would rise to freedom. She said, You'll see the smoke of cannons over New Orleans again, John. You'll see the ground soaked red, and it will be the beginning of your end." Then she spoke of a greater war, one that would reach across oceans, and another still, even more fearful in its nature, where the world would burn from its own inventions. Many now believe she foresaw the First and Second World Wars. Finally, her tone darkened. "There will come a time," she said, "when the earth grows too hot for man to live upon. When the forests burn and the rivers dry. The people will call it progress, but it will be their undoing." And then she added in almost a whisper, "When the heat becomes unbearable, man will light the final fire himself." Chapter 6: The End of the Visitations. For months, the witch continued to appear, sometimes speaking gently, other times vanishing mid-sentence. She told John Jr. she was preparing to leave again, but before she did, she made one final prophecy. "I'll return again, but not in 7 years this time. 107. When I come again, I won't speak to you or your kin, but to your descendants and to those who still whisper my name." That was the last time John Bell Jr. ever heard her voice. Chapter 7: The 100-Year Promise. If her words were true, her next return would be in 1935. But when that year came, nothing happened. No voices, no knocks, no blue flames. Some say she did return quietly to another family nearby. Others say she never left at all, that her presence still lingers in the hills of Adams, Tennessee, waiting to be heard again. And yet the land never truly found peace. Chapter 8: Lingering Shadows. For decades after the Bell home was abandoned, travelers swore they saw flickering lights in the fields, candles moving on their own, vanishing when approached. Fishermen near the river claim to hear singing from the trees, a woman's voice carrying through the fog, the same melody Lucy Bell once heard on her sickbed. In 1866, two men camping by the river heard what they described as a symphony in the air, music so clear and harmonious it felt divine. When they looked for its source, the sound stopped instantly. In 1872, two young girls on their way home at dusk heard it too. A chorus with no singers, a hymn with no words. And in 1875, something darker happened. In Chapter 9, The Murder of Smith. A man named Smith, a drifter who claimed to possess the mantle of the Bell Witch, arrived in Red River. He boasted that he could control people's minds, that the witch had passed her power to him. Weeks later, he was found dead, shot by two men who swore that Smith had bewitched them, forcing them to obey his will. They turned themselves in, claiming self-defense against witchcraft, and somehow the jury acquitted them. The court accepted that defense. It was as if the fear of the Bell Witch still haunted the county long after her voice had faded. Chapter 10, The Legacy of the Witch. The legend of the Bell Witch survived through whispers, stories, and the writings of the Bell descendants. Richard Bell, John's son, kept a journal of the hauntings. In 1846, he published it under the title Our Family Trouble. Then, in 1894, Martin Van Buren Ingram, a local newspaperman, compiled that journal with other accounts to publish an authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch. It was his version that spread across America, the one that made the Bell Witch a national legend. But skeptics claim Ingram invented much of it. No contemporary newspapers mentioned the haunting while it supposedly occurred. No sermons, no church records, not even a letter. Just the Ingram account, decades after the fact. Even so, the legend refused to die. Because those who've stood in that quiet patch of Tennessee soil, those who've walked into the cave that bears her name, swear that something still stirs there, something unseen, something waiting. Chapter 11. The Bell Witch Cave. On the north boundary of the old Bell Farm beside the river lies a cave, cold, deep, and carved through limestone. It's said that the witch once followed the Bell children inside. When a boy got stuck crawling through a narrow tunnel, his candle went out. He screamed, and then the whole cave filled with light. A hand, unseen, seized his legs and pulled him free. The witch's voice said, "I'll get you out, boy. But next time tie a rope round your waist, even now." Visitors claim to hear whispers in that same tunnel, and sometimes faint laughter, the same laugh that haunted the Bells 200 years ago. The witch said she would come again. Some say she already has, because in the stillness of the Red River night, you can still hear the echoes of a voice that refuses to die. I am a spirit. I was once happy, but have been disturbed. And now, I am here. Part 7. The Legend and the Doubt. For more than 2 centuries, the Bell Witch story has lingered, whispered between generations, retold by travelers, and studied by skeptics. Some call it the first documented haunting in American history. Others say it was simply a tale, exaggerated until it became myth. But one thing is certain: the name Bell Witch changed the way America spoke about the supernatural. Chapter 1. The Records That Weren't There. When historian M.V. Ingram published an authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch in 1894, he claimed every word came from the Bell family's own accounts, from journals, letters, and eyewitnesses who lived through the haunting. But when researchers began searching for those records, they found almost nothing. No newspaper reports, no church logs, no mentions in the Tennessee archives. Even Andrew Jackson, who Ingram claimed had personally visited the Bell farm, left no note of it in his journals. And Jackson wrote everything. It was as if the witch had appeared only in one man's imagination, and from there, into America's folklore. Chapter 2. Fact or fabrication? Some historians now believe Ingram fabricated much of the story himself, that he took small fragments of truth, the names, the farm, the family's tragedies, and spun them into something larger. A tale that felt real enough to frighten, but vague enough to never be disproven. Yet, even that theory doesn't explain everything. Because in Albert Goodspeed's History of Tennessee, published 8 years before Ingram's book, there is one paragraph. A brief mention of a haunting in Red River, a remarkable occurrence known as the Bell Witch. No details, no embellishment, just acknowledgement. It's small, but it's enough to suggest that something strange, or at least something widely talked about, truly did occur there. Chapter 3. The Research of the Skeptics. In the early 2000s, researcher Phil Norfleet spent years tracing the Bell family through census records, wills, and court documents. He confirmed that John Bell lived in Robertson County. He found the land deeds, 320 acres, not the 1,000 claimed by Ingram. He even found the names of the family's enslaved workers, Dean, Harry, and Phyllis, listed in local registries. But he found nothing that hinted at witchcraft. No witnesses, no sermons, no public panic. The Bells were ordinary people, farmers, churchgoers, and yet the legend that grew around them was anything but ordinary. Chapter 4. The Legend's Evolution. Over the years, the story changed with every retelling. In one version, the witch was a vengeful neighbor named Kate Batts, angry over a land dispute. In another, she was a spirit summoned by accident, a voice from beyond, awakened by greed and guilt. And in others still, she was something far older, a demon, a fairy, or a manifestation of human sin. Each generation added something new. Each storyteller filled in the gaps left by the silence of history. And perhaps that's what kept her alive, because stories, especially terrifying ones, have a way of surviving when evidence fades. Chapter 5. The Power of Fear. The Bell Witch became more than a ghost story. She became a reflection of fear itself. Fear of the unseen, fear of judgment, fear of what happens when faith and reason collide. Her voice, whether real or imagined, forced people to look inward, to ask whether evil is born in the dark woods of Tennessee or inside the minds of those who believe too deeply in it. And maybe that's the real curse of the Bell Witch. Not that she haunted the Bells, but that she never stopped haunting the rest of us. Chapter 6. The Legacy Lives. On today, you can visit the Bell Witch Cave in Adams, Tennessee. A reconstructed cabin stands near the original site. Inside, you'll find artifacts, photographs, even stones from the Bell chimney. Tour guides will tell you the same stories of laughter in the dark, of voices echoing through the cave, of visitors who swore they felt something touch their shoulder when no one was there. Some leave skeptical, others leave shaken. But almost all of them look back before walking away, as if expecting to hear something whisper their name. The witch once said, I am a spirit. I was once happy, but have been disturbed. I am everywhere, in the air, in the house, at any place, any time. And maybe that was never a lie, because even now, 200 years later, her story still moves. Through voices, through books, through screens. Every time someone says her name, she wakes, if only for a moment. Chapter 7. Outro. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't, but in the end, what matters most isn't whether the Bell Witch existed, it's that she still does. Because as long as her story is told, the Witch of Red River will never truly be gone. And if you listen closely on a quiet Tennessee night, you might still hear her whisper, "Old Jack Bell, are you sleeping?" Part 8. Epilogue. The Echoes of the Witch. 200 years have passed since the Bell Witch fell silent, and yet her story refuses to stay buried. Every few years, something happens in Adams, Tennessee. Something small, something strange. A tourist hears laughter in the cave when no one else is inside. A flashlight dies the moment someone speaks her name. Phones record voices, faint, female, whispering words no one remembers saying. Coincidence, perhaps, but the witch's promise was never forgotten. When I return, the world will know what I am. Chapter 1. The Modern Hauntings. The town of Adams still wears its history like a scar. Locals will tell you the witch doesn't haunt the bells anymore. She haunts the land itself. The fields where John Bell once walked are now empty, but farmers claim their animals still panic near the old property line. Dogs bark into the dark woods at nothing. Cattle refuse to cross certain fences as if sensing something unseen. In the Bell Witch Cave, tour guides say electronics fail without warning. Batteries drain to zero. Cameras distort with streaks of light. And sometimes a pale face appears for just one frame before vanishing. One guide told of a woman who fainted during a tour after hearing a voice say, "Don't touch that." No one else had spoken. No one else had heard it. Chapter 2. The Voice Returns. In 1998, a group of amateur investigators brought recording equipment into the cave after hours. For hours, they sat in darkness, listening to the slow drip of water from the limestone ceiling. When they played the tape back, later that night they heard something faint beneath the sound of the river. A whisper. A woman's voice, low, distant, but clear. "Who are you? And what do you want?" The same words John Bell once asked in 1817. The same question that began it all. They never released the tape publicly. They claimed it didn't sound like an echo. It sounded like a reply. Chapter 3. Tourists and the Cave. Every October, the Bell Witch Cave hosts guided night tours. Candles flicker, shadows bend, and storytellers recount the legend in hushed tones. Some visitors leave laughing, saying it's just good theater. Others refuse to step back inside. In 2013, a group of college students on a ghost tour reported hearing someone crying in the back tunnel. They thought another tourist had gotten lost, but when they went to look, the tunnel was empty. One of them described the sound as a woman sobbing, then laughing through it. The same description appears in Richard Bell's journal. Chapter 4. The Unexplained Phenomena. Even the land itself seems to carry a memory. Visitors describe the temperature dropping suddenly near the site of the old Bell home, as if the ground still remembers what happened there. Dowsing rods twist on their own. Compass needles spin. The faint smell of sulfur, like burning metal, drifts through the air. Some say it's just the cave's natural gases. Others say it's her. the same scent that rose from the fire the day John Bell's poison vial burned blue. Chapter 5. The Witch in the World. But maybe the witch doesn't haunt Tennessee anymore. Maybe she's not a ghost tied to a farmhouse or a cave. Maybe she was right. Maybe she's everywhere. In the hum of a late-night power line. In the voice you think you hear when you're alone. In the flicker at the corner of your eye when no one's there. I am in the air, in the house, in any place, at any time. Her words weren't just a warning. They were a truth. Chapter 6. The Silence. After. If you stand by the river today, you can hear the water moving under the limestone. Slow, ancient, endless. The Bell house is gone. The family buried, their fields reclaimed by time. But legends? Legends never die. They whisper in the dark, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. And in Adams, Tennessee, there's always someone listening. Old Jack Bell, it's time to wake up. Subscribe and walk deeper in the dark.